and welcome to Landscape Express chat series. Today is the 7th session, and we have with us Anumol Antony. She graduated from SPA in 2020. She was working with Naveen Associates before that, and now she is working at Khatib and Alami. She will be sharing a thesis that's transforming wastescapes into rich urban ecology through phytoremediation and design approach with us this evening. Over to you, Anumol. You can present now. Hello?
Hi, is the screen visible?
No, not yet.
Now?
Yeah, it is.
So I'll try not to take much of your Friday evening time.
Oh, that's all right. We have time.
So, when you happen to scroll down your social media platforms, and that now that we are in this pandemic, everything is going online. When we scroll down like 5 minutes, we just get to see like a lot of beautiful destinations of pristine nature. So those are the landscapes that are like untouched by man. Now, what about the ones that has been touched by man? So that is something, it looks like a little bit surreal or like the manufactured landscapes. So this one is one example of a photographer named Edward. So he's a photographer who focuses mainly on industrial landscapes. So this looks straight out of the alien land, or this one. So these landscapes, they're like the two sides of a coin. When you see the top one, it looks very surreal and beautiful. But as a landscape architect, this is a scary fact. So that's the impact of what man has done to it. So these landscapes can never go back to what it was before. But if we try to revive them, it will be something different. So my topic was about how industries like, but what is this? Like the story behind these massive transformation of these manufactured landscapes is about the demand for products, about the as urbanization happens, there's a demand for products, and we get an exchange of foreign currency, which is at a faster pace. So if we see like, so I started with like what are the causes of industrial pollution, and once this pollutant is being like let out into the environment, how does it go into the water? Is it by runoff or direct discharge, or how it goes into the soil and water by leaching? And so that's how I started with it. And so I've taken my site as in Hyderabad. So Hyderabad is like a case where it is a land of lakes. So since it's a rocky terrain, they have to have, like, they started storing water from the early ages, and this was like built all around the river Musi. And the cities are completely dependent on the surface water, but from a past few decades, the water bodies are like shrinking and disappearing. So this triangular image is an image of like what is the status of the lakes, like whether it is totally reclaimed, or is it in the status of degradation, or whether it can be rehabilitated, and how a few of them are still being potential for recreational purposes and all. Then you have, so this is a study of how Hyderabad has evolved over the years. As I told you, like in the 1400s and all, the complete city happened to start in along the river Musi. So slowly they started, as the population started growing, they started building their towns in and around these lakes. So once the urban spread happened to sprawl over in a faster rate, the lakes started disappearing. And today we get to see this is a picture. So the lakes have decreased and the land has increased. So I've selected the case of MMK Lake. So this tells me this. So this maps is in comparison with. So this is in comparison with the transition of the urban growth and how it impacted the glue structure. And so from here, I tried to take out, like, I will be focusing on this Noor Muhammad Kunta. So that's how I came up to this lake in Hyderabad, like after the macro level. So NMK is one such lake that can be reclaimed, and it is situated in the upper stream and is a major source of pollution to a chain of lakes in the downstream. So this, which is in the upstream, it flows till here. So as of now, this is surrounded by the industrial areas and all. So when the site, it's located in Hyderabad within the municipal corporation area. Towards the south side lies the industrial area. So this one is industrial area, and the NNK lake lies in between the highway and between this industrial area. So over the period of year, what happened is these three lakes. So I've tried to focus on these three lakes on a macro scale. So as you can see over the period of time, like the usage of water. So now this NNK lake is of no use, and this Shivarampalli lake that's within the Agriculture Institute is now used for irrigation, but like earlier it was used for irrigation, but now it is of no more use. And then this again flows downstream to the Mir Alam lake. In the earlier ages, it was used for drinking, for the drinking water of animals, irrigation, but now again it's of no use. So all these water bodies are like a global sink. So the soil and water acts like a global sink in these cases, which is now of no use. Then I tried to study, I'll just tell you a overall way. I won't be getting into the details of it. So this is how I started studying with the industries. So I tried to study the typologies of industries and how it impacted the soil, water, vegetation. So these classification of the industries are being given by the Pollution Control Board. Think the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So they have categorized them into red, orange, green, white, and gray. So these are categorized again on the basis of the pollution index. So red being like the more toxic one. So that's how it is being categorized. And I also tried to study the extent and the impact of how these pollutants were affecting. So this is like how the arsons has been distributed till the Mir Alam lake. Though it started at this point, it's been an influence till this area. So I tried to study the extent of the impact of the solution and how earlier. So this is how it actually goes into the lake. So this was one route. So these were the short ways. So just remember like this one way, because I tried to modify this while I was proposing. And then I tried to study about, I tried to categorize the red, orange, green, like what are the toxic elements. So whether it is an inorganic pollutant, an organic pollutant, like what are the types of pollutants, and to what extent, how is it being affected to it. And then I tried to study about the natural layers. So we try to overlap the climatology, slope analysis, hydrology, vegetation, fauna map. So this climatology, we actually happen to refer to an article. So that says us, that helps us with it helped me to study the climatology map with respect to the thermal and dynamic load. So for example, when you come to industrial areas, what happens is when there is an increase in gases into the atmosphere, it will lead to the increase in temperature. So when the temperature rises, it will start absorbing certain chemicals, because at a higher temperature, it has an ability to absorb certain more chemicals. And when these chemicals are being absorbed, it will actually change the properties of the water. So that is how the pH, BOD, COD and all are being varying to a very extensive range. And another thing is like the spread of gases due to wind direction and during the monsoons. So that is when it leaches into the soil and it destroys the vegetation of this complete area, and it spreads the invasive species at a very faster rate. And the slope analysis just tells us about the terrain, which is again influenced by the hydrology. And then the vegetation, through this I got to know it's more of a scrubland, and the vegetation around this area is a little bit more dense. And again the fauna, it's more like localized over here than over here. Then that's the most of the kind of overlap of the natural layers. Then learnings from the case study. So I picked up two of it, Shanghai's and Baton Rouge Lake. So from these two lakes, I tried to come up with few references like inferences, like the water quality can be improved by using phytoremediation, adding landscape typologies, or creating a wildlife matrix. So then after these case studies, I came to an objective, like I formed an objective for how to go ahead for this. So it was to like transform the polluted lake and its presence to an ecological site through landscape design and strategies. Then, since I understood that these things can be um, remedified using phytoremediation, so I started doing research on phytoremediation. Phytoremediation is nothing but it's an accumulation or degradation. So the plant tries to accumulate these chemicals within it, or it will try to degrade it. Like a simple chemical compound can be degraded into further compounds. So the plant just does this two activities in the accumulation or degradation. In either of the cases, after a certain period of time, you will have to uproot the plant and just like either burn it or like again like cap it in another area. So you don't try to plant any kind of vegetatives or anything like that. So there are specific plants for that in phytoremediation, and these plants respond positively to different contaminants. So this is another graph. So phytotechnologies is not just one way. You have different kinds of technologies for such cases like industrial landscapes. But the thing is, uh, if you go for the first one, the cost will be high, but it will get remedified in a very short period of time. But at the same time, there are chances that these machines or whatever techniques that they use could be you'll have to keep replacing it. So replacing it at a very faster pace will actually cost us a lot, but but it gets solved. But phytotechnologies is one thing which remedifies the land over the time at a less cost. And phytoremediation for such sites is a hit and trial method. You never know it's going to work or not until it's going to be planted in the site. So that is also there. But then you have a help of research papers saying that this plant has helped in absorbing certain chemicals at a very faster rate, and it grows also in a very good way. So thereby remedifying that plant. So you try to depend on research papers where such things happen to take place. So I try to. This is an example of like how I try to refer from research papers. So that's about phytoremediation. Now moving about to the synthesis. So the synthesis, like so the major issues in this industrial land is majorly like dumping of waste. So when you try to dump the waste, it actually leaches into the soil, and they just directly the effluents are directly discharged into the lake, so which runs along the railway line. So there were most of it was like that. So there's toxicity, light climate, sediment deposition, habitat suitability, disturbances in the land. So keeping in mind all of this, my main vision for this site was to heal the stressed and degraded environments by transforming the undesirable barrier through the phytoremediation and to reform the bond with nature. So this was my vision for this program. And coming to the CLDP, so I try to give on a broader level, like programs. So since this is a highway, I try to give a little bit of planting buffer on either sides. So it's like it's a barrier to the visual as well as it reduces the pollution level. And the second thing is all these secondary roads were also, it was unlined. So the drains were unlined. Excuse me. Sorry. So these secondary roads or tertiary roads, they were unlined. So it leads to a lot of leaching. Just a minute. I'm sorry. So yeah, so these were unlined drains. So the more it is unlined, if you try to concrete it, you try to reduce a problem by you stop the problem of leaching in that area. So I try to make those drains lined and try to introduce a planting buffer, and then laying of pipes and then proper treatment. And then I also proposed try to propose a land use change. So the land use change, I tried to change the red industries to orange and green because there was a certain calculation and all. One of all the industries over here, the red was only 12%. So, and red leads to the most toxic chemicals. So I try to change the land use by converting the red to a less polluted one, orange or green. And then, so either these, there are some vacant spaces. So all these are vacant spaces. So these vacant spaces were like acting as dump yards. So instead of making it as a dump yards, I tried to propose a kind of gathering spaces just under a tree. So like in the villages you just see the as like a tree and people gather in and around, so it's just that way. And so these were the broader level interventions that I did. And here like a small treatment plant, and then that's how the broader level strategies go. Next, coming to prioritizing the need. So the remediating the site is like the major priority, so that the people can use it for recreational purposes. So the concept of here was to create a complete contrast of the contaminated and the dark edges of the city, and to revive the ecology, which requires a very long-term attention and constant improvement. So as well as simultaneously adapting it to the urban environment. So remediation becomes not only a solution for cleaning the junk, but it is also an urban laboratory where people can come and try get a new urban experience also. So I try to give up like 3 landscape design approaches: restorative, educative, and celebrative. So coming to restorative and educative. So based upon the research and all, I came up with this section, like the schematic section. So how this effluent water that is being channelized from the industries is allowed to flow through a series of ponds. When it flows through a series of ponds, what happens is it gets cleared of certain kind of chemicals. The the gray bars of here try to indicate at what level the sediments are being present in the ponds, and the soil in the site is like contaminated, and so for that the sediments that are drenched from the lake needs to be remediative. So that's done via capping. So the water is being it flows through a series of ponds. So for that I had to do a certain number of calculations, like depending upon the quantity of water that is being discharged on a daily basis. So with respect to that, I try to, based on, this is all based on the research papers. So it says like for a certain period of time, like for the screening and separation it takes like 1 day, and for coagulation and flocculation it takes like 12 days, and then it needs to be in the detention ponds for a certain number of days. So based upon these calculations, those ponds were also designed so that it can store that much amount of water. Coming to the soil, it was actually the top layer or these kinds of soil in this area is very toxic. So you cannot plant anything. So it needs to be first you need to till the soil, loosen the soil, and distribute the mineral rich subsoil. And you try to add a fence, then you try to add a mulch, and you try to cap it. So once you try to cap it, there's again another facings and all that's done. That we'll get into the later part. And coming to the celebrative part. So once this land is remediated, who is it going to be used for? One, it's going to be used for the residents in and around the city. And the next, there's an agriculture university, so for the students to take up researches, and the highway passengers. So based upon those categories, I try to again divide it into different age groups, like what kind of activities could be given to them. So that's how it is done. And so this is a graph that I found it from one of the books. I don't remember the name of the book. It's I'm not sure. So I'll just if anybody needs it, I'll just message it to Pallabi. Okay. So I would suggest, if you all are going ahead with this topic, if there's a possibility to buy this book or get it from the library, it would be really great, because I don't think much of data. So most of the data for my thesis was like from her book, and I don't think it's available. Pardon?
Yeah, no, because that was already a question that someone wanted me to ask you. Like, where did you source your information from?
Yeah, so this is one place.
Okay, so I'll get the name from you later.
Yeah, sure.
It's
I think only a few snippets of those books, few snippets of those pages are available in the internet. That too, even if you search it quite a lot, then only you get to see them.
okay.
Yeah, so this was something that I made classified into. So based on this graph, you see that the more the toxic, it takes more than decades. So she tried to divide those pollutants into two types, organic and inorganic. So I also, in the initial stage, I tried to separate it into organic and inorganic. So for organic, what is the phytoremediation techniques? So for organic, these phytovolatilization, degradation, rhizodegradation, and for inorganic, these can be done. So see, this is how she tried to categorize it. So based on this, it was clear that based on these contaminants that are released, it is clear that it takes more than 30 plus years to remediate. So it is a clear thing that this design needs to be carried out in phases. So I tried to again make it into 3 different phases. Phase 1, the forming phase, which is a span of 0 to 3 years. And then phase 2, the evolving phase, which is a span of 4 to 15 years. And then phase 3, 15 to 30 years. Phase 4, the complete action plan, or it could be beyond 30 plus years also. So this is how I tried to break down those phases. So in the first phase, my major goal was to modify the contours and stabilize the soil, which will actually take up around 0 to 3 years. So the strategies were on the broader level, like the conversion of red to orange. Then I have to try to prepare the site. So how do I try to prepare the site? Desilting the lake. First, I have to desilt the lake, remove all the toxic sediments. Then the contours needs to be modified. And the top layer of the soil is actually fit for nothing. So because it's being contaminated completely due to leaching and the sediments that are recovered from the lake around the edges. So it all makes up like piles and mounds. So what I did was you'll have to like make mounds. So over the period of years, what happens is during the weathering, these mounds will form the natural topography, and then you can actually try to like uh, if you want to make it flat, or if you want to like change the layers of the soil, that also can be done. So this was regarding the soil. This is about regarding the site preparation. Now in the phase 1 itself, there is one more thing called the vegetation strategy. So in this vegetation strategy, like that is using the phytoremediation, the primary succession. So the least expensive and the most practical means for establishing trees on a contaminated site is to plant small seeds or small bins of species like grasses. So grasses should be the first species that should be planted on this kind of site, because once a grass has been planted, like you can wait. There's a waiting period like around 1 to 2 years. So it is recommended that these before you select a certain area for planting trees and shrubs, that particular area needs to be planted with grasses, because if the grass cover, so if its shallow roots dies or fails to germinate because of these contaminated soil or because of influx of gases from the site, what happens is it is a clear cut thing that your deep rooted vegetation like trees or shrubs will not survive there. So the first thing, you try to plant the grass, check if it's germinating there. Then you try to go for trees and shrubs. And the next thing, the second phase. So in the second phase, it was more of like making room for water. So now that I tried to form the mounds and like the ponds and mounds, it forms a lot of undulations in the site. So these are the different ponds. Like earlier, I tried to show you these ponds, right? So these are the same ponds with the respected capacities. So this was during the monsoon period, and this is during the lean period. So I tried to accommodate like the water during the monsoon and during the lean. So the hydraulical strategies, uh, the concreting the embankments. So the first 9 embankments over here were to be concreted so that we try to avoid leaching. And then the next is to stabilize the lake edge, and during the monsoons allowing the storm water to drain through the filtration system, the reed beds and bioswales will reduce the sediments, suspended solids, and heavy metals in the storm water before it flows into the lake. And then you try to create a green belt. And then the vegetation strategy. This is where the secondary succession comes. So shrubs are being planted. When it reaches a considerable height, it shows a significant growth on the contaminated site, so that it can adapt to the root system and to its adverse environment. Then, since this is a contaminated site, setting up a nursery would be best, because it's always a hit and trial method. Just because the research says you that it worked there, it should be a starting point, like to have you start with it, but that cannot be the solution. It is a hit and trial method. It could work there or it could not work there. So for that is why you try to set up a nursery, an experimental field, and a phytoremediation laboratory in the site, for which you actually have phytoremediation experts also. And then phase 3, here the goal was to integrate the recreational and the restoration space. So this was after 15 to 30 years. So here my strategies were to create a network of paths to build in that are built between the ponds and mounds, which allows the visitor to know and experience the site. And the programmed activities like that I discussed in the celebrative one. And the vegetation strategies here was the tertiary succession. So in this stage, the trees are being planted and it can adapt to its root system, to its adverse environment and all. So the next thing was So after all these facing, so the next thing was to propose a planting palette which can extract the different contaminants from the soil. So I tried to come up with a plant list. So these are a few of the plants that can be used in the phase one. These are a few of the plants that can be used in the phase 2 and 3. So based on the research, I tried to come up with the tolerance level, the absorption pollutant levels and all. So this is that. And these are like few sections like which cuts through the site. So I actually tried to form a lots of mounds and like depressions and all. So I tried to carve out spaces within that mound area, and how within the monsoon period how the water floods in. And so this is all about those undulations in the site that I tried to create. So this is how it is. Any doubts or any questions?
Yeah, we're open to questions, everyone. Thank you so much, Anumol. That was a really nice presentation, and was very helpful for us. We're open for questions. People, please ask. Y'all can type out your questions in the chat box also. Please go ahead. So I'll ask the first one. I was just wondering, when you suggested that you'll change the land use pattern and replace the red category industries with orange and green. How do you suggest that would happen? Are they like, do you how do you suggest that would happen? You replace the set of industries altogether?
So see, in my case, it was a group of like 300, 400 industries that was in large scale, small scale, and in those different scales it was there.
Yeah.
So, like by the time my site visit, the plastic has been banned, right? Only like now single-use plastics are being allowed. So a few of them industries were already shut down at that time.
Yeah.
So there could be reforms like land use and all, which will be coming up in the future. So that's a different thing. But then when I suggested this, yes, there was questions regarding that. But I tried to say that these red industries, out of the whole, they were only 12% in my site. So trying to change the 12% to another color, like to another category,
Yeah.
it's still better, because these 12% which comes under the red is the cause of the major pollutant that is still affecting the other 3 lakes and beyond it also. So 12% for like me wasn't a big problem, but it actually differs on different contexts and all.
Yeah, I am asking this because sometimes there could be sites where this is a given. It's a rigid requirement, like you cannot change. I mean, that place is allotted for heavy industries. Those are red category industries.
So yeah, then that is where you cannot do anything. So one thing that I would have done, like so once I start getting into deep, is when I try to realize how scary this is getting in the initial stages.
Right.
So I would suggest like I have the data, so I tried to go the second time. That is when I got all these numbers sorted, and it wasn't easy also to get these numbers. But then somehow I tried to manage it. But then I would suggest, if you're going for a site, it would be always good if it is something like one particular industry. So if it is one particular industry, you can just research on that one particular thing and try to get better with it.
Right.
Mine was completely on a very broader scale.
Yeah, but I think we would also have to go for a broader scale itself. We've been asked to select like a bunch of industries together, like a zone that houses, and it's never, when you select a zone, you can't pinpoint on one particular industry. Then it's a cluster of many industries, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing is happening here also. So I don't
So
know.
in Hyderabad itself, I've like got to know like there's pharmaceutical industry, so that comes under completely red. So that is one typology of industries in one particular area.
Right.
So the smaller it is, it's also getting better. So industrial landscapes, that is also one category, like the one that is active. And for these kind of, if like this is like the topic, now if I had to do it again, I would definitely choose something which is like abandoned.
A passive industrial side.
Yes.
Industrial side. Ah.
Yes, that is like completely abandoned.
Right.
Because Highline is also like a very good example of one such thing. So an abandoned one will not be this riskier and scarier,
Right.
but it's a very clear-cut thing. You don't have to. It is easier when compared to this, but I wouldn't. Like once you get deeper into it, you know how much you are into it. Like how much the mess is.
Right. Right. So, what were the types of industries that your site was surrounded with? Like, yeah, you mentioned plastic.
So yes, it had like almost like every type. It had like the metal. So it was more, the red includes the metal, and then the orange, there was like textiles a few, and plastics were also there in abundance. So yeah, there were like paper.
Okay. Okay, so it was a very heavily industrialized area.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Any other questions, people? Please ask. I'm sure I'll have some questions. No one? Okay. We have a question in the chat box. So yeah, Bazna Resmin asks, is there some phytoremediation methods to treat contaminated water?
Yeah, that it is there. So now your contaminated water. Now you start asking questions like, what is the quantity? Like in a second, how much of amount of water is being discharged? And you will have to try to test that water, saying like what are the kind of pollutants that are seen in that water. Now, once you try to categorize these pollutants, you now so now when you categorize it under terms of organic or inorganic, or whether the content of nickel is more or iron is more, whatever, based on the content you will try to focus on, like try to check out research papers like saying that this was successful in this particular area using certain kind of plants. So you will have to research on that based on the content and the quantity of water.
Right. Any other questions, anybody?
So have you selected the site?
Yeah, so we have 4 sites with us right now. 2 are post-industrial and 2 have to be active.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we are still kind of all over the place. We still have to figure out exactly what, but yeah, we've pretty much narrowed down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the post-industrial also, it goes in the same process. It's just not that it's not active, but still you will have to figure out, like you will have to test the soil, you will have to test the water, figure out what are the chemicals that were there, to what extent is it has been spread in and around the city.
Okay. There's another question from Sachin. He's asking, what would you suggest about the boiling waters coming out of the industries? I'm sure that also has some ecological impact.
Yes. So the hotter water. So I was in the climatology. I was telling you with the rise in temperature, how it actually when there is a rise in temperature. So the rise in temperature is also because of the hot boiling water that is being discharged from these industries. So when there is this hot water being discharged, it tries to at a higher temperature, it tries to absorb more chemical. So now again, there is a categorization like small scale, large scale. So if it is a large scale industry, they will definitely and they have to make measures like within the industry, there needs to be a treatment that these water should not be like discharged at this particular temperature. But when it comes to a small scale, they won't do it because they cannot afford for that. Since it's a small scale, putting up another small treatment area just to cool down the water, they're not going to do it. So, like you have to either try to club up all these small scale industries and create a small plan for them. Try to try to give a separate utility area, those pipelines and all that directly go to that treatment plan, and then it has to be discharged to the lake.
Right. Yeah. I actually want to ask you one more thing. So you have adopted a complete phytoremediation technology for the whole thing, which is quite time taking, right? Given that this is in an urban area, could you have adopted a hybrid system that would have been a little faster? Because usually urban areas demand,
So I was also showing you one of the slide where there's like dig and howl, incineration, all that. So I showed a clear timeline like going for a different process will cost you more and easily you can get remedified in a particular time. But these lands which are like contaminated to a higher level, you never know like so they could be machines and I still don't have a clear cut this, but so they could be machines that are being targeted for certain kind of chemical. So other than that, if another chemical comes up, it could damage it. So that repair and to and fro will actually cost more.
All right.
And one more thing is that be it any kind of high tech or even phytoremediation, this is a hit and trial method. Until it is done in the site, you cannot be sure that it's 100% success. But to start with, this is like I try to follow. Like this is like the most successful way. Like how to start with it.
Right. Yeah, of course that makes sense.
And as a landscape architect, even if you go for a hybrid, I'm not sure like how the faculties or the jurors will be welcoming for that.
Right.
They would try to look for more greener and adaptive
systems. Yeah, I got you. Okay, do we have any more questions? Anyone? Okay, there's another from Abhinami. She says, I heard that you didn't get permission to go inside the industry. What are all the details you managed to collect during the visits? What needs to be done in that case? Yeah.
So, the first time I went, I didn't get, I tried in the most legal way, trying to visit all the authorities.
Yeah.
And they denied me because this is an industrial area. If it gets published, it is a problem for them. So they feared all that. That was the logics. And then, when I went for the second time, I had a clear-cut idea like what I wanted. And since the legal ways were not trying, I tried to visit inside the industries like a few people. So they have a proper record, like how much of it is flowing, in what quantity, and what are the industries there. That is one thing. And then another best part of my area and my site is that within a kilometer radius that is opposite to the highway, there's an agricultural institute. So they've been trying to the industries list, I've got it from them, like the industrial area, and the kind of contaminants or whatever it is, that is being mostly given by the agricultural institute. So they have been trying to do researches like what are the chemicals that have been present in this particular soil or in that particular water. So I didn't have to put much of work in trying to get it tested and all.
Yeah.
So they helped me out with those details.
So that was one of your primary sources for information regarding all your pollutant.
Yeah. It is a complete research organization also, the Agricultural Institute. Like what happened to grow, like how the site happened to be transformed, what is the effect. So that was a big thing.
Right. Okay. Any more questions?
So for these topics, until you get the numbers and the quantity and the categorization, I don't think they help you in going about further. So try to make sure like you get the values.
Yeah.
So there won't be any issues with the jurors or anything, because that is how you start it also. If you don't have that basic work or that basic information, I don't think they will allow you to explain anything further.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the best.
Yeah, I guess we don't have any more questions. Thank you so much, Anumol, for giving us your time. It was very insightful session actually. And I guess we can get in touch with you eventually if we need some help.
Yeah, sure. If there's anything that I can help you out, I will do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll end the session here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.